Hey guys, and welcome to video 2 of week 3. And today we're going to cover pretty much all of our CRUD operations that I mentioned on week 1, which is create, update, read, delete. And we're going to do these using SQL. Now, I know some of you have had zero experience with SQL, some of you have had a lot of experience with SQL. So those of you that have had experience with SQL, bear with me. For those of you that haven't, so SQL, or Structured Query Language, is the quote-unquote programming language we use to interact with our databases. Now, SQL consists of a command, which can be select to pull records, update to update records, or this would be our read, this would be our update. Then we would have insert, which is our create, and then obviously delete. And so these are the three common commands that you're going to be working with primarily. Now, there's more to a SQL command than just this first part, or the action part, as we'll call it. So in order to use a SQL statement, we have to give it a little bit more information. So let's start with insert, or not insert, let's start with select or read. So in select, we have, basically there's a structure to a SQL statement. And the structure here is really going to be, action, columns, from, table name, conditions. So in the case of a read operation, right? So a select, we're going to say select star. Actually, let's just say select last name, first name, and we know this because we could see the columns down here on the bottom. But we could also do a select star, which says give me every column in this, give me every column back. So a select statement is going to return a collection of columns, so columns and rows. So if I say give me just first name, last name from Northwind, so this is where we're specifying our database, .dbo .employees. So you could see I'm saying the Northwind database, and then I want the table dbo.employees. And we'll go ahead and comment that out. I'll touch on comments here in a second. You could see I've only gotten 2 columns back. I've gotten all of the rows that are in that table back because I haven't specified a condition or a where condition to give me a smaller subset. But if I do the same query using doing a select all, as you can see, I get back all of the columns associated with the table. Now, you guys are seeing me comment, so comments in SQL, a little tangent, and then we'll get back to select statements. Comments in SQL can be done one of 2 ways. If you guys have worked with Java before, they're similar in some ways to Java comments. So single line comments are obviously just 2 dashes, as you see me do, right? So I can type some stuff up. If I get rid of my comments, I get an error in my in my SQL viewer. For those of you guys that don't know how to, I don't want to save that. For those of you guys that don't know how to create a new query, in our SQL Server Management Studio, we're going to hit the new query button. Probably should have started with that. So, like I said, single line comment, just 2 dashes, and you can have some single line stuff. But then if I go down here outside of that, obviously I need a multi-line comment. So multi-line comment is very similar to Java, /* and then close it with */. And so just to bring up some data again. Oop. So we've got our data back. Now, say that I wanted to get a subset of this employee data, right? So say that I wanted to get only the sales representatives from my table, right? So I wanted to query and I only wanted to pull back the sales representatives. So this is where adding where clauses comes into play. And a where clause is basically a conditional addition to our select statement that allows us to get a subset of the data out. And so we say where title is equal to sales representative, or where last name is equal to King, or where employee ID is greater than whatever, 8. So say we want to pull back the sales representative, so we can say where sales, if I can type it right, where title is equal to sales representative. And so in SQL, we'll just use the single quotes to delineate a string. And so now you can see I've added this where clause, and I have pulled back only my sales representatives. Now let's say I wanted to pull back all of the sales representatives who also have hire dates later than 1994, right? So what I can do is I can add an additional condition to my where clause, and I can do so by saying and hire date is greater than 1994-01-01. And so now you can see I've pulled back my employees that are sales representatives that have been hired after the 1st of January 1994. And we can continue stacking these where clauses together to, we can continue to stack the where clauses together to get smaller subsets of the value, right? Or the values. We can also pull back, just like I said, we can just pull back individual columns. So I could pull back just first name or just last name, or I could pull back just the relevant information. Because as you can see, there's a lot of columns here that maybe I don't need. Maybe I don't need all of these columns. Now, let's say that, let's get rid of that where clause for a second. Now, let's say that I wanted to identify all of the employees that report to Andrew Fuller. So now I can specify, and this is just a use case, right? So now I can say where, and let's say I just want their first name and last name. So I'll say first name, last name, and the order doesn't matter in our column names, right? So I can say first name, last name, employee ID, right? So that'll give me my first name, last name, and employee ID. The data is going to be spit back out by the order you specify your individual columns, right? So we'll say where reports to equals 2. So now you can see I've got first name, last name, and employee ID, all of who report to employee ID 2. Now, let's say that I wanted to order this data that I've pulled back. So we can order the data by specifying order by, and then so order by is going to come after your where clause. So we've got where as a clause, we've got order by, and then we're going to specify a column name. And let's say employee ID DSC, or descending. So DSC is descending, ASC is ascending. So ascending is going to give me my data as it sits in the database right now, and descending is going to give me my data based upon, or in reverse order, right? So employee ID 85431. I can also do it, but that doesn't have to be done on an integer column. I can also do that on a last name column, or on a string column or a varchar column. So I could say order by last name descending. Let's make that ascending. So now you can see I've got Steve Buchanan, Laura Callahan, Alex Davolio, and so on. So that is pulling our data back, and let's make sure we're still recording. That is pulling our data back, conditionally pulling it out, right? So adding conditions to our statements, and then ordering our data. And this is just an introduction for you guys. We'll get into more detail next week. So as for the rest of our CRUD operations, right? So we've covered read. Now we need to cover create, update, and delete. So let's go ahead and put a select all on deck just so that we can view our data as it comes in, right? So the update statement is the first one I want to go over. And the update statement is pretty simple, right? So the update statement is update table name. We may also have to specify the database as well as the table, right? So I may have to say something like northwind.dbo.employees. So we're going to say update northwind.dbo.employees. So we've said database and then table name, and then we'll say set first name equal to Margaret. I always forget how to spell Margaret. Let's go with say Donna where. So now our where clause is coming back into play, right? So with update statements, we have to specify a where clause. We can't just say update Northwind DBO employees set first name equal to Donna, because the SQL is not going to know how to, or the database software isn't going to know what rows to actually set the first name to Donna to. We have to specify a where statement. So where employee ID is equal to, and we'll go ahead and say northwind.dbo. And so this is another way that we can do this, right? So we could say in our where clauses and even in our select statements up here, we could specify the database, the table, and the column name, where employee ID is equal to 9. So we'll go ahead and run that SQL and then query our data again. And as you can see now, employee ID 9 has been changed to, or the first name of employee 9 has been changed to Donna. So now the next question is, okay, so I know how to, I get the gist of conditionally updating rows, or I get the gist of updating a single column in a table with conditions, or conditionally. So now I want to know, okay, so how do I update multiple multiple rows, right? So let's say that Donna Dodsworth has not only has gotten married and has her title changed to Inside Sales Coordinator. So we're going to do that in a very similar manner to the way we just did our update, but we're going to tweak our set a little bit. So we're going to say update DBO dot, we're going to say update Northwind DBO employees set last name equal to Fisher, title equal to Inside Sales Representative, where employee ID equals 9, right? Representative, there we go. So we'll go ahead and run that, and then we'll pull out our, we'll pull our data back out, and as you can see, so now Donna has, oh, we forgot to change her title of courtesy. So Donna has had her title changed and her last name changed, but she hasn't had her title of courtesy changed. So we're going to have to just go in and update that real quick. And so we'll come in to our other update statement and we'll say title of courtesy equals Miss, and then we'll run it. So now you can see Donna has had her title changed, her last name changed, and her title of courtesy changed. So pretty easy on the update statements. The next thing that we need to cover is creating new records. So creating new records is pretty easy. We just need to find a table that has not so many fields. Let's see. So we'll do it in the fields, i.e. columns. We'll do it in the, we'll do it in the categories. We'll do it in the categories table, right? So let's say that our Northwind company has created a new category of products called sporting goods, right? And so we want to update the database to reflect that we have a new category of products. And so we do this by saying by using an insert statement. And an insert statement says insert into, and then we specify, as I said, our database and our table dot categories, and then we say values. So we'll say 9 and so what we're going to do is we're going to list inside of these parentheses, we're going to list, or we're going to add a record, quote unquote, or an entry for each field that we have to fill in our table. So we're going to say sporting goods, And then we're just going to leave that picture null. So we've got insert into northwind.dbo.categories values 9 sporting goods, guns, knives, fishing equipment, clothing, and then we're going to leave the picture null. So if a field isn't required, we can omit it. So this should work. So now if we do and I'm getting really sick of typing the full database, so we're going to say use Northwind. And what saying use Northwind does is it tells SQL Server Management Studio to automatically assume that our commands are going to be typed against the Northwind database. So now we can just say select star from dbo.categories. So now I have a category ID, a category name. I screwed that up. Okay, so I screwed up our, what did I screw up here? Category ID, category name, description. Okay, so I forgot to specify a picture. Okay, so we'll fix this, and then we'll jump ahead to the deletes, and then we will go ahead and fix this. So deletes are pretty self-explanatory, right? So a delete is deleting a record or multiple records from a database. We usually want to, and we are deleting whole rows at a time. We can't delete individual columns. So what we can do now is we could say delete from DBO categories where category ID is equal to 9. So we'll go ahead and run that. And that's really the gist of a delete statement, right? So a delete statement is just delete from table name where these conditions match. So deletes are pretty easy, nothing too crazy to be concerned about. So we'll go ahead and comment that out, and then we'll run our select statement. So now you can see that our bad record has been removed, right? So now I can go ahead and rerun our insert command and specify a picture too. Okay, so here's where I made my mistake. All right, on this insert statement. So I assumed that category ID was not auto incrementing, and that's where I made a mistake. So we know that category ID is probably the primary key of that table, and we could even do so by clicking the table button. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Okay, yeah, so we can click on the columns, and we can see, okay, category ID is the primary key, and it can't be null. So by right-clicking on categories and clicking the design key, which you can see right there, now I can view the column properties of each column that I'm looking at. So let's look at category ID. So it has an identity specification of, yes, so it is an identity. The identity increment, and this is what I was talking about in a previous video with primary keys usually being identity keys as well. So our identity increment is 1, our identity seed is 1, and so because of that, if we go back to our SQL, I didn't have to specify category ID, I could start at category name, and in fact, it expected me to start at category name. So by specifying 9, it assumed that my description was actually my picture. So now so that's insertions, right? And insertions don't use where clauses because we're just adding new data. So there are, and we'll get into this later, there are things called replace statements. And this is like an insert, but it's also an update. And we will get into those later. So for right now, that is the CRUD operations we want to cover. So delete from DBO categories where category ID equals 9. So that's our delete statement. And like I said, we can stack these on top of each other. So I can say category name is equal to beverages. Now, what is the problem with this statement, though? Right? So let's go ahead and run this. So what's the problem with my statement? So I have, and this is where logic comes into play, right? So I'm deleting from categories where category ID is equal to 9 and the category name is equal to beverages. Okay, well, there is no category 9 in the table, and there is only one category name, but its ID is category 1. So I've created basically a logical fallacy, kind of, or not a fallacy, a contradiction. So that's delete statements. We could stack the where clauses together. So if you guys have any questions, email me and reach out. I may upload more content for this week, but this week is really about you guys exploring SQL and getting to know the platform a little better, or not the platform, but the language a little better. So I wanted to cover that so that we have some content to go over this week, and then I will be uploading a quiz to Blackboard as well as a discussion board post, and that should cover it. So like I said, reach out if you guys have any questions.